Years ago, I used to be very against Bitcoin, but then something happened. I learned about it. And in October of 2020, I made a video about how and why I changed my mind. And I recommended starting with a 5% allocation to Bitcoin and never selling. At that time, Bitcoin was trading around $11,000. Now it's had some crazy highs and some crazy crashes since then. And as of the time of this recording, the price of Bitcoin is hovering around $100,000. But most people who have been around Bitcoin for a long time call these ups and downs parts of a Bitcoin cycle. So I'm going to show you exactly what a Bitcoin cycle is and why we might actually be in the final one. And then I'm going to show you what you can do about it, because don't worry, you're not too late. If you take a look at this chart, this is the price of Bitcoin. And if you think it looks a little wonky, that's because we are looking at a logarithmic chart, which basically shows percentage moves rather than dollar moves, so that you can see more clearly the movement that happens at the lower range. You're probably used to seeing a chart that looks more like this, which is a linear chart. But for our purposes, so that you can more clearly see what we're looking at in terms of the cycle, we're going to be looking at the logarithmic chart from here. I've also drawn 4 lines on this chart, and this represents the beginning of each cycle for Bitcoin. Each one of the lines on that chart represent the date of the Bitcoin halving. But what is the halving? The Bitcoin halving is the date in which the supply of new Bitcoin coming onto the network gets cut in half. The most recent halving happened in April of 2024, and the one before that happened in May of 2020, and the halving before that happened in July of 2016, and the halving before that happened in December of 2012. These halving cycles are roughly 4 years long, and it is built in to the way that Bitcoin works, so that every 4 years, the number of new Bitcoin coming on to the network gets cut in half. Looking back at this chart, you can see that we are basically looking at the inflation rate of Bitcoin. As it stands right now after the halving from April 2024, the current inflation rate is about 0.8%, which means annually, the new supply of Bitcoin, the supply increase, is about 0.88%. Now you might be wondering where this new Bitcoin goes. It goes to miners. Miners are the ones who are responsible for maintaining the network, and their fee, their compensation for doing this is to receive new Bitcoin that is coming onto the market. But every 4 years, that new supply gets cut in half. Now, assuming constant net demand, when you look at all of the buyers and all of the sellers, if you cut the new supply coming onto the market in half, now assuming a constant net demand, meaning all buyers and sellers stay roughly the same, if you cut the supply in half of the new Bitcoin entering the network, then again, all else being equal, that should drive the price higher, which is why every time you see the halving happen, you see a massive bull run in Bitcoin turning into a bubble and being followed by a crash. Starting in 2012, bull run, bubble, crash, recovery. Starting in 2016, bull run, bubble, crash, recovery. Starting in 2020, bull run, bubble, crash, recovery. The reason why I'm taking so much time to explain this Bitcoin halving cycle to you is because most people assume the new craze for Bitcoin happening right now and the price run up is a direct result of the incoming Trump administration being friendly to crypto. And that certainly helps. But most people who have been paying attention to Bitcoin for at least a couple of years were already expecting a big bull market to happen at the end of 2024 and into the beginning of 2025, just from this cycle alone. So yes, the external stuff happening to Bitcoin and more adoption of it absolutely helps. But the fact that the supply of new Bitcoin getting cut in half was happening in April of 2024, people already expected another bull market to start. And considering where we are in this 4-year cycle, you would anticipate 2025 to be an extremely good year for the price of Bitcoin, where a bull market turns into a bubble before another crash. But I said at the beginning of the video that this might actually be the final cycle of Bitcoin. Now, none of us has a crystal ball, so we don't know if that's true. But what we do know is that if Bitcoin becomes money in the future, there will be a final cycle of Bitcoin. This cycle will not continue into perpetuity with the value compared to everything else, like another currency, going up and crashing all the time. You can't have that as a stable currency, as a unit of account, as a measurement of value being used as money for everything everywhere. Mass adoption would mean eventually that cycle stops. So could we be witnessing in real time, mass adoption, Bitcoin being monetized, turning into base money for everyone, everywhere, all around the world. Well, I don't think we are there yet, but it is possible. And so I'm going to show you a few things that are happening right now that could absolutely lead us there. The first thing is they scramble by publicly traded companies to follow the MicroStrategy playbook. Right now, MicroStrategy is the massive leader in terms of publicly traded companies holding Bitcoin on their balance sheet. MicroStrategy owns 1.2% of the total Bitcoin supply, worth a staggering almost $25 billion. And their total cost for that $25 billion worth of Bitcoin right now is just under $10 billion. You can see even the number 2 company only has $2.5 billion worth of Bitcoin on their balance sheet. But we are starting to see a scramble by publicly traded companies that they might need to start holding a hard asset like Bitcoin on their balance sheet in order to protect them from inflation and also maybe to boost their company's shareholder value. And it's not just the companies that have already started to do this. There are new companies that are every day announcing new plans to buy Bitcoin for their treasury reserves. Now, this doesn't mean they are going to be spending that Bitcoin like they would if they were saving up dollars. But I'm going to get to that in a moment and why that's actually important for the adoption of a new form of money. You wouldn't expect a new form of money to be used for spending at the beginning. So that's the first thing that's happening right now. There's a mad scramble by publicly traded companies to add Bitcoin to their balance sheet, which is very bullish for the price of Bitcoin. But it doesn't stop there. The next significant thing happening right now is nations adopting the El Salvador playbook. Led by Bukele a few years ago, El Salvador began buying up Bitcoin, and it also named Bitcoin as legal tender. Now, for a while, this landed them in a lot of hot water with the IMF and other world leaders around the world who care more about fiat currency that they can constantly devalue. But at least as of right now, it looks like Bukele was right and other nations are joining in on the bandwagon. Most importantly, the United States right now has big plans for Bitcoin. Trump has recently been moving forward on plans to create a United States strategic Bitcoin reserve with a plan to buy 1 million Bitcoin, not $1 million worth of Bitcoin, 1 million total Bitcoins. There's only 21 million that will ever exist. And the plan as of right now is that the United States is going to buy 1 million of them. In light of deteriorating financial conditions for the United States, the debt, the national deficit, the trade deficits, inflation, interest on the debt, and all the other problems that the United States government is facing financially, a Bitcoin reserve could give them a cushion to fall back on should they ever need it, similar to the reserves of gold that the United States allegedly has. And if the United States does indeed move forward on this, then you can expect that there will be many other nations, sovereign wealth funds, and central banks that follow suit. And one of the other trends happening right now is mass adoption by Wall Street. We are obviously seeing many different ETFs and funds introduced that allow people to bet on Bitcoin or invest indirectly in Bitcoin through their brokerage accounts or IRAs. But we have yet to see pension funds and large money managers add Bitcoin to a diversified portfolio as part of standard portfolio advice, something like a 1 or a 2% in things like pension funds or target date portfolios. And as Bitcoin reaches more mass adoption, then you would expect to see more and more investment from a lot of these passive large funds. So between publicly traded companies following the MicroStrategy playbook, nations following the El Salvador playbook, and future pension funds and money managers following Wall Street's footsteps of adopting Bitcoin, we have a lot of buying pressure in front of us. But nobody is going to be spending Bitcoin, at least not at first, because that's not how a new money comes into use. Imagine you exist right now during the fall of Rome, and everybody buys and sells with their gold coins. But the emperor comes out one day and says, hey, there's people out there that are forging gold coins. There's fake gold coins out there. And so they look like they're from us. They have my face on them, but they're actually fake. So what we need to do is have everybody turn in their gold coins. And what we're gonna do is melt them down and restamp them with new stamps, new faces, new designs on them. That way, you'll know which ones are legit. And it turns out that everybody just goes along with this, but when the emperor gives you back your new coin, you realize it's been mixed. It's no longer pure gold. Now there's other cheaper metals mixed in. So you gave up an ounce of gold and you got back maybe a half an ounce of gold. Still the same size, but it's less valuable. Well, during this process, what do you think people will do who have not yet turned in their old coins? They're gonna hoard them because they know they're actually worth more. And what are they gonna do with the new coins that are in circulation from the emperor? They're gonna spend those. This is called Gresham's law. It's where bad money drives out good money. Because if you've got two forms of money that the government says are equal value, well, you're gonna get rid of the one that some people have to take that is actually less valuable. You're gonna keep and store the one that you know is more valuable. A similar effect happens to nations that are undergoing hyperinflation. I have a friend that for years lived in Lebanon. They recently had to leave, and he experienced most of the recent hyperinflation that was going on there. Now, there are plenty of currencies that are being used for transactions in the black market or the parallel market. And what people will do is they will accept and demand dollars or euros when and if they can. And they will keep them and store them because they know they're gonna hold their value. And anytime they have to spend money on something, especially if they're buying something from the government, they're gonna use their lira or their Lebanese pounds. So the money that is in circulation being used for transactions is always going to lean towards the money that people want to dump the fastest. The only reason somebody else will accept that money on the other side of that transaction is if they have to. But everybody will buy up and store up the money that will keep its value the most, or maybe even increase in value. But when you play this out to the end and you see countries that go all the way through hyperinflation and out the other side, eventually that collapsed currency stops trading 100%. Because on the other side, nobody will accept that decimated currency anymore for transactions. So the only way to buy and sell will be to use the harder currency or the harder money that you've been storing up. This is how a new money displaces an old form of money. You see the usage of the old bad form of money skyrocket as everybody tries to spend it as much as they can so they can get rid of it. And you see the store of value of the new money increase as people hold on to it. And only once nobody accepts that old form of money as payment anymore does the new store of value start being used as a medium of exchange. And the way you know that that point is near is denomination. When you start seeing prices or salaries or contracts denominated in the new money. In the case of this video, we're talking about Bitcoin. That's when you know you're about to reach mass adoption and the money is about to switch over. Yes, we have some NFL players who are saying, pay me in Bitcoin, but the salaries are not denominated in Bitcoin. It's the exact same thing as getting paid in dollars and then using those dollars to buy Bitcoin. It's really meaningless. The only thing that actually matters is denomination. When people are saying, hey, I want you to pay me 1 Bitcoin a year, or I want you to pay me 10 Bitcoin a year, regardless of what the dollar price is, that's denomination. And that's when the money has actually switched. Now, in order for that to happen, the price of Bitcoin in today's dollars with the current money supply would probably have to be somewhere around $1 million per Bitcoin. And that would get the market cap of Bitcoin roughly equal to the market cap of gold. And given the fact that Bitcoin is currently playing with around $100,000 per Bitcoin, a future target of $1 million of Bitcoin in terms of today's dollar value means you're still early. Yes, you missed out on 50,000, and yes, you missed out on 20,000, and yes, you missed out on 5,000, but you don't have to miss out on 100,000. Could it go to zero? Absolutely. If everybody just decides, I don't actually want to use Bitcoin as money, and we don't get the mass adoption, it's going to zero. So never bet more than you can afford to lose. This is an asymmetric bet. It can go to zero, but it can go up a lot more than that. That's why I say put 5% of your money in it. That's enough where if Bitcoin becomes money, it will increase your net worth significantly. But if it doesn't and it goes to zero, you won't really care that much. Okay, so how do you get started? There are a ton of ways to do this. I'm gonna share with you my opinions and what I tell my friends and my family. Number one, start an account with Swan Bitcoin. They focus exclusively on Bitcoin, and so they're not gonna be throwing a bunch of altcoins and shitcoins at you like Coinbase, trying to get you to pump and dump your money on something that's gonna go to zero. They're Bitcoin only. Because of that, they're very efficient, they're very cost effective, and they're very secure. Swan allows you to set monthly, weekly, or daily automatic purchases of Bitcoin. I recommend daily. That way you take advantage of the price volatility, and you can set that up automatically. So once you set it, you forget it. You never have to think about it. The next thing you do is you set up an auto withdrawal from Swan to your wallet. You don't want to leave it there. You want to put it in a wallet. I prefer cold storage wallets, hardware wallets. You could choose like a Ledger or a Trezor. There's plenty others, but you want to move it automatically to a wallet of your choice. And then third, once you have at least one full Bitcoin, but probably a couple, then you want to move it into a multi-sig account. Swan can help you out with this. There are plenty of ways to do it as well. Multi-sig is just more secure. It means that you need 2 signatures in order to access your Bitcoin rather than just logging onto an app. And so in the long-term scheme of things, it does look like as long as Bitcoin does reach mass adoption, become money, that you are still early. You can get started and still experience some massive upside from here. But it's always possible this is not the final cycle. We get a bull market, a big bubble, and a big crash. So hold on tight and be ready. As always, thanks so much for watching. Have a great day.